Our high holidays are filled with such incredible imagery as we enter a transcendent space. We have the book of life with our deeds that are measured. We think of God's mystery and judgment. Our machzorim, our prayer books, help guide our journey of the soul. The high holidays remind us how limited we are in controlling our fate, yet with tshuva, the path to righteousness, tefillah, prayer, and tzedakah, righteous giving, we are able to forge new paths. While we are not capable of perfection, we aspire to better ourselves, our relationships with friends, family, and our community. The yamim hanoraim, the days of awe, provide us a spiritual gift, the possibility of new visions with which to embrace life. We begin our service this morning on page 110. How beautiful are your tents, Yaakov, your dwelling places, Israel. In your great love, let me enter your house to pray, awestruck in your holy place. Your kindness has led me to your house. Here I will honor you. I pray to you, God, that this may be a good time for our meeting. Out of your great love, let me perceive your truth and find your help. Continue our service on page 112. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher קידישנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. והערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו, ובפי עמך בית ישראל. ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, supreme power of the universe. You sanctify our lives with mitzvot and give us the sacred obligation of learning and living Torah. Our God eternal, let us taste the sweetness of your Torah's words and let them give pleasure to your people, the house of Israel, so that we, our children, and all generations of Israel to come shall know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah le'amo Israel. Blessed are you, Adonai, who instructs your people Israel in the ways of Torah. We continue with a tefillah for our soul on page 122. Pure, my God, is the soul you gave me. You formed it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me. You keep it safe within me. Someday, when this soul returns to you, I will find a place in eternity. But as long as spirit breathes within me, I place before you my thanks. Eternal, my God and God of my ancestors, creator of all creation, sovereign of all souls. שנתת בי טהוריי. אלוהי, אלוהי, נשמי, שנתת בי טהוריי. אתה בראת, אתה יצרת, אשר נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי. אלוהי, אלוהי, שנתת בי טהוריי. Please rise if you are able for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 141.
יתכתב ויתקדש שמי רבה ביעל בדי ורחירותי ויניח מלכותי בחייכן וביומכן ובחיי כל בית ישראל בעגל וזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יש ברמה מברך לעולם ולעולמי ישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושביחתה ונחמתה תמירין בימה ויאמרו
Remain standing for the Baruch Hu on page 142. Bless the eternal, the blessed one. Blessed is the eternal, the blessed one now and forever. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. אור עולם באוצר חיים, אורות מאופן אמר, ויהי. המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליה ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית. מה רב ומעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ קנייניך. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפארוך סלע. אור חדש של ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. Source of blessings, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light, creating darkness, making peace, and fashioning all things. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God. It was so. And love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, divine artist. All of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. May you shine a new light on Sion, and may we soon be privileged to share in that light. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. Our praise to you, Adonai, creator of the cosmic lights. We continue on page 146. אהבה רבה, אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ויתרה, חמלת עלינו. Love abundant, love unstaining, our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bounds, your precious gift. Our fathers and mothers gave you their trust, and you gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well, grace us with your guidance, loving Father, merciful Mother of us all. Grant us clear understanding that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning your Torah light up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. We continue with the Shema on page 150. Listen, Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. You may be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
You shall love Adonai your God with all of your mind, with all of your soul, your strength. Set these words which I command you this day upon your heart. Teach them faithfully to your children. Speak of them in your home, on your way, when you lie down and rise up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand, and let them be a symbol before your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Be mindful of all of my mitzvot and do them. Thus you will become holy to your God. I, Adonai, am your God, who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I, Adonai, your God. We continue on page 163. The voice that redeems us comes from within. Said Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai, consider the courage of Israel. When Moses said to the people in Egypt, arise and go forth, they did not ask, how can we go into the wilderness with no sustenance for the way? They had faith and went forward. The voice that lifts up the lowly, upholds the exhausted, and tells us to put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes it comes from within.
שיבחו גאולים לשמך שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני אלוהינו
We turn now to page 166, and we rise for the Amida.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agiti hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu ve'Eloi Avoteinu li'imoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanur Elyon, Gomel Chasadim וקוני הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביבוא. מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
We continue now on page 170. Your life-giving power is forever, Adonai, with us in life and death. You liberate and save, cause dew to descend, and with mercy abundant, lovingly nurture all life. From life to death, you are the force that flows without end. You support the falling, heal the sick, free the imprisoned and confined. You are faithful even to those who rest in the dust. Power beyond power, from whom salvation springs, sovereign over life and death. Who is like you? Merciful God, who compares with you? With tender compassion, you remember all creatures for life. Faithful and true, worthy of our trust, you sustain our immortal yearnings. In you we place our undying hopes. Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hakol, wellspring of blessing, power eternal. You are the one who gives and renews all life. You may be seated. We continue now with a few moments of silence. You may, as you wish, read from pages 171 through 173, and then we'll continue on page 174. And so let these words of sanctity ascend to you, for you are our God and sovereign. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal, you record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. And so a great shofar will cry Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments.
ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומאב יקרא, וחתם יד כל אדם בו. ושופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע. ומלאכים יחפשון, ומלאכים יחפשון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לפקוד הצבא מרום בדין. ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לפקוד הצבא מרום בדין, לפקוד הצבא מרום בדין, הצבא מרום בדין, בדין, בדין.
On page 178. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? who by famine and who by drought, who by earthquake and who by plague, who by strangling and who by stoning, who will rest and who will wander, who will be tranquil and who will be troubled, who will be calm and who tormented, who will live in poverty and who in prosperity, who will be humbled and who exalted. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree.
Rosh Hashanah, Ikaterun, Uvyom Zakibur, Ikaterun, Berosh Hashanah, Ikaterun, Uvyom Zakibur, Rosh Hashanah, Ikaterun, Uvyom Zakibur, Ikaterun, Berosh Hashanah, Ikaterun, Uvyom Shakit umi darif mi shalev umi tiasar mi ani umi arshe mi shavil umi arun Rosh Hashanah Ikaterun, Uvyom Zakibur, Ikaterun, Berosh Hashanah, Ikaterun, Uvyom Zakibur,
You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere, a glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name. And our name you have linked with yours. Will you please rise for the Kedusha? We sanctify your name in the world as celestial song sanctifies you in realms beyond our world. In the words of your prophet, holy, holy, holy is the God of heaven's hosts. The fullness of the whole earth is God's glory. God of strength who gives us strength. God of might who gives us might. How magnificent the signs of your being throughout the earth. Blessed is the splendor that shines forth from the eternal. Our God is one, Avinu and Malkeinu, sovereign source of life and liberation, revealing with mercy to all who live. I am Adonai, your God.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב היה נביאך, וקרא זה זה ויאמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מהדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני מכל. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכינו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני, קדוש, 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 אלוהי ציון, דור ודור,
We continue now on page 192. You are holy, your name is awe. There is nothing divine beyond you, as the prophet Isaiah taught. The source of all might is exalted through justice, the God of holiness made holy through righteousness. Baruch atah Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh. Blessed are you, Adonai, holy sovereign. You may be seated. You chose us with love to be messengers of mitzvot, and through us you made known your aspirations. Among all the many peoples, you gave us a pathway to holiness. Among all the great nations, you uplifted us and made yourself our sovereign. And so we seek you and serve you and celebrate our nearness to your presence. Your great and sacred name has become our calling. In your love, eternal God, you have given us this day of remembrance, a day for the shofar's joyous sound, a day of sacred assembly, a day to be mindful of our people's going out from Egypt. Our God and God of the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness. Together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel, may we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and for peace on this day of remembrance. Eternal God, remember us.
Amen.
Be mindful of us.
Amen.
And redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing.
Amen. Zochreinu Adonai Eloheinu b'litova ukvogdeinu b'livracha v'hoshienu
We continue now on page 200. We are stiff-necked and stubborn. Teach us to bend before you. Convinced we're right, entrenched in our own perspective, we resist your call to repent. Convinced we're self-sufficient, entrenched in the illusion of control, we resist your call to humility. Convinced we can have it all, entrenched in the dream of mastering the world, we resist your call to wake up. Today you summon us out of our arrogance, out of rigidity, fantasy, shallowness, self-deception. Teach us to bend our knees, to bow our heads before the mystery, to realize our frailty and our finitude. Teach us to make you Melech, sovereign in our life, to align ourselves with your goodness and truth. We would not bow before Pharaoh. We would not bow before the Persian lord. We would not submit to any power on earth or give ourselves to any material thing. But we, the Jewish people, stiff-necked, stubborn to the end, today we bow before you. We turn now to page 202 and we rise for the Aleinu. Continuing on page 205. Dwell on each sound of the shofar, contemplate its meaning. Tekiah, one whole note. Shavarim teruah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tekiah, one whole note. My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tekiah, once I was whole. Shavarim teruah. In the wear and tear of living, I became broken and shattered. Tekiah, my teshuvah has the power to make me whole again.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
Source of blessing, eternal our God, you fill the universe with majestic might, summoning us to hear the sound of the shofar. Source of blessing, eternal our God, you fill the universe with majestic might, giving us life, upholding the life within us, and bringing us to this time. Tekiah, Shavarim teruah. Tekiah, Tekiah, Shavarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. At the bottom of page 208, our praise to you, Eternal One, whose power pervades all the earth. You bring holiness to the people Israel and to this day of remembrance.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'amecha Yisrael u'tefilatam b'yahava titgaber u'tihi תמיד עבודת ישראל ישראל עמך
We continue now on page 214. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Borchenu babracha hamshuleshet hakatuva b'Torah, ha'amura mipi kohanim am kadoshecha ka'amur. Our God, divine presence, whose path our ancestors walked, bless us now with words first bestowed on Israel in the time of Moses and Aaron, the threefold blessing given us through Torah that joins our hopes with theirs. May you know God's blessings of shelter and care. May it be so. May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace. May it be so. May you see God's favor and goodness, and may you partake of God's peace. May it be so. You may be seated. Continuing now on page 216. Let there be peace, grant goodness, blessing, and grace, constancy and compassion to us and all Israel, your people. Avinu, bless and unite all human beings in the light of your presence, for your light has shown us a holy path for living. Devotion to love, generosity, blessedness, mercy, life, and peace. In your goodness, bless your people Israel with peace at all times. Baruch atah Adonai, Oseh HaShalom. You are the Blessed One, eternal source of shalom.
Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim v'rachamim aleinu, b'yal kol Yisrael, b'yal kol Yisrael alecha, bareinu avinu kulanu ki echad, b'yor panecha, ki b'yor panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim v'rachamim aleinu, b'yal kol Yisrael, b'yal kol Yisrael amecha, Torat chayim, v'yachavat chesed, v'yachavat chesed, u'tzedaka uvracha v'rachamim v'chayim, v'chayim v'shalom. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim v'rachamim aleinu, b'yal kol Yisrael amecha, v'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael, b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל עמך.
We now have moments for silent prayer.
Ihu liratzon imrefi. Ihu liratzon imrefi. Me'agyoni bilifanecha. Adonai tzuri v'goali. Oh, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be acceptable before you. Oh God, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, me'ako Yisrael, v'imeru,
We now turn to page 223, and I invite you to please rise for the Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Olaleinu Ve'tapeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever V'cherev Ve'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kol Tsar U'mastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kotveinu Besefer Chayim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Va'aneinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshi'enu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chemol Aleinu, Ve'al Aleinu, V'tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever
We turn to page 226. We are the people of the book. Through fire and mud and dust, we have borne our scrolls tenderly as a baby swaddled in a blanket, traveling with our words sewn in our clothes and carried on our backs. Let us take up the scroll of Torah and dance with it, touch it and read it out. For the mind touches the word and makes it light. So does light enter us as we shine.
Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'ma'asecha, malchutcha, malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor vador. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom.
Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, defiance and wrongdoing, granting pardon.
Adonai, Gadolul Adonai, Yiron V'Shemo Yachdav.
You may be seated. We are about to engage yet again in the reading of the Torah, in the reading of the moment of the binding of Isaac. We are in a Torah portion that is filled with drama. And I would like for a moment before we start reading to set the scene for what we are about to experience. Abram and Sarah did not have a child. Abram and Sarah desperately wanted a child. And eventually, Abram would have a child with Hagar. In chapter 20 of the book of Genesis, Sarah is taken to the house, the palace of Avimelech, king of Gerar. That, what we understand to be a proto-Philistine settlement in the city of Gerar, then becomes a place where Sarah is taken away and where Sarah's residence brings upon a curse upon the women and men of Gerar. And it is immediately following her departure from Gerar that we discover that Sarah is with child. Our moment in the Torah portion is the moment wherein, following some years, Abram, now with this child, very shortly after this episode, is going to engage in the binding of Isaac. This is the drama of Rosh Hashanah. And to engage in that drama, I would like to invite Rabbi Klein up to join me in the blessing for the Torah. Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, Venatan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים ניסה את אברהם. And it was after these things, this episode in Gerar, that God tried Abraham. ויאמר אליו אברהם, ויאמר הנני. And God said, Abraham. And Abraham said, here I am. This is a familiar trope to us. Vayomer, and God said, Kachna et bincha, et yechidcha, asher ahavta. And God said, take, please, your son, your only one, whom you loved, et Yitzchak, Isaac. ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה ותעלהו שם לעולה על אחד ההרים אשר אומר אליך. And go to the land of the Moriah and bring him up there as a sacrifice, a raised offering upon one of the mountains that I will indicate to you. וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו ויקח את שני נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עצי עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. And Abraham rose early in the morning and placed his goods upon his donkey, and took his 2 lads with him, and Isaac his son, and cut wood for the burnt offering. And he got up, and he walked onto the place that God had told him to go to. ביום השלישי ויישא אברהם את עיניו וירא את המקום מרחוק. On the 3rd day, Abraham cast his eyes and saw the place from a distance. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלכה עד כה ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. And Abraham said to the lads, sit here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go to that place. We will bow down, and we shall return to you. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק. And Abraham took the tree, the pieces of wood for the burnt offering, and placed them upon Isaac, beno, his son. ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. וילכו שניהם יחדיו, and they walked together. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו. And Isaac said to Abraham his father, the first time in our Hebrew Bible that Isaac speaks. Isaac said to Abraham his father, Vayomer, and he said, Avi, my father. Vayomer, and Abram said, Hineni bni, here I am, my son. Vayomer, and Isaac said, Hine ha'esh v'ha'etzim ve'ayeh ha'seh la'olah. Here we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Vayomer Avraham, Elohim yar'eh lo ha'seh la'olah. Abram said, God will show us the lamb for the burnt offering, my son, beni. וילכו שניהם יחדיו, ויבואו אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים, ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח, ויערוך את העצים. And they came to the place that God had indicated, and there Abraham constructed the altar and set the wood. ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, and he bound Isaac, his son. וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל לעצים, and he placed him on top of the altar above the wood. וישלח אברהם את ידו ויקח את המאכלת, and Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife. lishchot et beno, to slaughter his son. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם, אברהם. And an angel called out to Abraham from the heavens, saying, Abraham, Abraham. Vayomer, and he said, Hineni, here I am. Vayomer, and the angel said, Al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar, ve'al ta'as lo me'uma. And the angel said, do not cast your hand upon this lad, do not do a thing to him. כי עתה ידעתי כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך, את יחידך ממני. Now I know, for now I know, that you fear God, for you did not spare your son, your only one from me. Vayisa Avraham et einav, and Abram cast his eyes. Vayar, and he saw. Vehine ayl echad ne'echaz basvach bekarnav, and here was a ram whose horns were tangled in the thicket. Vayelech Avraham vayikach et ha'ayl, and Abraham went and took the ram. Vayalehu le'olah tachat beno, and sacrificed the ram as a burnt offering instead of his son. Vayikra Avraham shem hamakom ahu Adonai Yireh, and Abraham called that place God, the source of life, will see. Asher ye'amer hayom bahar Adonai Yireh, which is called today the mountain where God, the source of life, may be seen. The place that would, in our tradition, house the Temple of Jerusalem. Vayikra malach Adonai el Avraham shenit min hashamayim, and the angel of God called upon Abraham again from the heavens, Vayomer, and he said, the angel said, Bi nishbati ne'um Adonai. Thus said the source of life, I swear, ki ya'an asher asita et hadavar hazeh, velo chasachta et bincha, et yechidecha, ki berech avarchecha, והרבה הרבה את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים וכחול אשר על שפת הים. Because you have done this thing, and you did not spare your son, your only one. Indeed, I will bless you, and I will indeed multiply your progeny like the stars in the heavens and the sand on the coast, on the board of the sea. וירש זרעך את שאר אויביו, והתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ. And your progeny will inherit the gates of its enemies, and in your progeny will be blessed all the nations of the earth. עקב אשר שמעת בקולי, because you have heard my voice. וישב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע. And Abraham returned to his lads. Isaac, we don't know. And they rose and they went together to Be'er Sheva. Vayeshev Avraham. And Abraham sat Be'er Sheva, in Be'er Sheva.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Amen.
At this time in our Torah service, our minds turn to those who are in need of healing, to those who are in need of strength, to those who are in need of support. If at this time you are thinking of anyone who would benefit from a prayer, who would benefit from our good thoughts and our energies, I invite you to please utter the names of your friends and loved ones now.
Tiffany Bosson, Jessica Atwood.
We turn to page 245, 246, and we turn to the Mishaberach.
Find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu b'kor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. This is the Torah that Moses set before the people of Israel at the command of God by the hand of Moses. I invite you to please rise. V'zot haTorah asher sa Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael, al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe.
At this time, we turn to page 267. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, זכרנו בזיכרון טוב לפניך, ופוקדנו בפקודת ישועה ורחמים, משמי שמי קדם. God of remembrance, remember the covenant of our ancestors. We reaffirm it today. Remember we are a people of noble ideals. Help us attain them.
Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace. Bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, Abram's words, "Here I am." כי זוכר כל הנשכחות אתה הוא מעולם ואין שכחה לפני כיסא כבודך. Our memory fades, but you remember all that we have forgotten. Your presence is a throne where all things matter and nothing is lost. Baruch atah Adonai, zocher habriot. You remember the covenant, you remember us. I invite you to remain standing for the sounding of the shofar. Tekiah, shvarim teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, shvarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. We turn to page 270 with a prayer for our congregation. Eternal Presence, who blessed our mothers and fathers, bless this holy congregation, a house of study, prayer, and righteous deeds. Together we give thanks for our leaders, those who learn, teach, and uphold the Torah, inspiring others to learn, teach, and uphold the Torah. Those who do the sacred work of building our community. May their service bring them joy, fulfillment, and purpose. And may they go from strength to strength. For all our members, diverse in age, interest, and background, Jews by birth, Jews by choice, and those of other faiths who join with us, all who offer their time and talent, their love and commitment, for all who come here on this holy day of Rosh Hashanah, wherever you may be, to share the search for meaning and renewal. Your presence is a blessing, your friendship a gift. May the spirit of peace, dignity, and respect live within these walls, inspiring us to care for one another with compassion, and may we be a source of goodness, light, and healing for the world. May the one who blessed the generations before us bless us as we stand together this day, one congregation, joined with all Jewish communities of the world, through our prayers on this festival of the new year. Let us renew ourselves for the year ahead. Let us honor the precious legacy that is ours. We turn to page 276. All praise God's name, for God's name alone is truly sublime.
Alleluia, alleluia.
A precious teaching I have given you, my Torah, do not forsake it. A tree of life to those who hold it fast. All who embrace it know happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew in our time the days of old.
כי לכך טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אהבת אזי, חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכך מאושר, דרכיך דרכי נועם, בכל נתיבותיך שלום.
We remain standing and we turn to page 282 as we prepare yet again for another sounding of the shofar. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, tka b'shofar gadol lechirutenu. God, revealed to us and to our fathers and mothers before us, God of revelation. Play the song of our freedom on the great shofar. Let your banner fly over the gathering of our exiles. Bring back the dispersed. Let those who are scattered find their way home. Let joyful songs of Zion greet us in Jerusalem, your holy city, the place of our people's eternal happiness. Baruch atah Adonai shomea kol truat amo Yisrael berachamim. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of your people, Israel. Tekiah, shevarim teruah. Tekiah, tekiah. Shvarim, tekiah, tekiah, teruah, tekiah gedolah. seated. Shana Tova to all of you. I wish you were with us. I wish we were in person. But more importantly, I wish upon all of us a year of health, a year of safety, a year of well-being, a year of fulfillment, and a year for us of some movement, of some progress. And in this regard, I would like to speak with you. And I would like to speak with you using the words that you have spoken to me over the past few months, and remind you of some of the conversations that we have had. Have you, in the last year, in the last months, watched the news, considered a recent development, and thought to yourself, where am I? Is this really happening? Is this my country? Let me share with you some extracts of the conversations that I recorded, that I held with a number of you during the past few months. Do you remember meeting with me and telling me about your patient? Telling me that your patient learned from a friend that there was a carefully concealed computer chip in the COVID-19 vaccine. Do you remember telling me about your response to that patient in your office? Please tell your friend not to worry, you said. As long as you do nothing wrong, the government won't come after you. Remember this conversation leading us to doing some research in the spring, confirming that millions of people around us believed that COVID-19 was a conspiracy led by the government and the pharmaceutical industry, aimed at depriving us of our sacred liberties. Do you recall our conversations about the notion that following approximately 18 months of pandemic, millions of casualties around the world, and more than 600,000 in this country, if the CDC is to be believed, still only just over 50% of our country's population is vaccinated. Do you remember our conversations? Do you remember how we felt? Do you remember the unease you spoke to me about in the stores, the grocery stores, the restaurants, the airport, on airplanes, when people disregarded COVID-19 safety rules or refused to obey them? Do you remember telling me again and again, when you did not want to enter into discussion, disagreement, or argument? Do you remember 4 months ago the discomfort and offense that we spoke about following your being with some of your friends? You, yes, I'm speaking to you. You know who you are, who define yourself as a liberal, who told me you have struggled for liberal causes throughout your entire adult life, to discover that more than one of your liberal friends now describe themselves as anti-Zionists. Remember our conversation? And by anti-Zionists, we meant not merely people who are just critical of Israel and its policies, but people who are vehemently opposed to the very existence of Israel, believing that Israel's founding is the source of much of the trouble in the world today, and thus that by extension, those who support the existence of the State of Israel in any form, and remember, perhaps especially Jews who should know better, are guilty of supporting an immoral, indefensible political entity, guilty of the oppression of a colonial or apartheid state. You remember? You remember our conversation? Do you remember how upset you were? Do you remember the experience that you spoke to me about with regard to the feeling of being criticized, sometimes even shamed, for expressing what you believed were legitimate criticisms of Israel among people who felt that Israel should not be criticized? Do you remember this feeling that you spoke to me about of being censored, as if a line had been drawn? Do you remember telling me you had decided not to raise the issue again? Do you recall, you who came to speak to me earlier this year and explained to me in my office, we were masked and distanced, that you were a supporter of President Trump, that you deeply appreciated his staunch support for Israel and aggressive stance against China, but that you had serious misgivings about his role in the events of January 6th? How uncomfortable it was for you, that it felt as if there was no one out there to talk to. Do you remember? And do you recall the feeling of self-consciousness, discomfort you described to me when you said you had voted for President Biden, but were now increasingly concerned about his rush to negotiate another nuclear deal with Iran, about what you saw as overblown spending proposals, and having seen some footage of him, you're concerned about his general mental acuity and decision-making capacities. Do you remember telling me in my study how uncomfortable you felt speaking about these issues with your children because you felt that they would dismiss you as a conservative? Do you remember telling me you no longer wish to discuss politics with your children? Do you remember just recently the person who called me in tears, telling me how distraught you were about the new law passed in Texas, your fear that this Supreme Court would overturn Roe versus Wade, that you feared Ohio would not be far behind Texas? You told me, I can't believe this is really happening in America. You remember that conversation? Have you, in the last year, in the past few months, found yourself becoming either angry or frustrated, deprived of an association or connection with either an individual or group you wanted to be associated with at a moment when you could have sworn you had not changed your mind, you had not changed your position, but others around you did? The ground around you shifted. The dynamics around you changed. The country changed. The world changed. The whole environment changed. And you suddenly heard your own voice saying to yourself, how did we get here? Is this really happening? Is this America? This feeling I'm describing to you today, using some of the words you shared with me, this feeling of being removed, of being othered, of being deprived of an association or an anchor, of being undermined, the feeling of having to hide, of wanting to respond but wishing to avoid an argument or unpleasantness, this feeling that there is no one to talk to, that others will not understand. This feeling is alienation. I feel our sense of alienation is increasingly palpable. And the more alienated we are, the more likely we are to hide, to wear masks. And not of this variety. We hide, we evade, we negotiate our way. Cloth and paper masks can and will be removed when it is safe to do so. The invisible masks we speak of, they tend to stick. They become second nature. Sometimes we can barely tell they are on. They allow us to function, and they have the capacity to change us. Alienation is a significant force. Alienation is a burden. Alienation bears a cost. The authors and redactors of the Torah knew a thing or two about alienation. The Torah portion of Lech Lecha starts with a promise of greatness, of blessing offered by God to Abraham. Remember the beginning of Lech Lecha? God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher ar'eka ve'escha legoy gadol va'avarechecha va'agadla shmecha. Go forth from your land, you in the singular, from your birthplace in the singular, from the house of your father in the singular, El haaretz asher areka, to the land I will show you in the singular. I will make you a great nation in the singular. I will bless you in the singular, and I will enhance your name all in the singular. No mention of progeny, no mention of children, no mention of second generations, third generations, nothing at all. The first time progeny comes up in the book of Genesis for Abram occurs in chapter 15 of the book of Genesis. Remember the beginning of chapter 15? God asks Abram to come out of the tent at night and says to Abram, look at the heavens, and promises to Abram that his progeny will be as difficult to count as the stars in the heavens, that there will be numerous people emerging out from the family of Abram. And then a deep sleep falls upon Abram. And during that deep sleep, we learn the first thing about Abram's progeny. During this sleep, God says to Abram, Da, ki ger yihye zar'acha be'eretz lo lahem, the first thing we learn about Abram's progeny. No, your progeny will be aliens in a land that is not theirs. Our entire Jewish identity is tied in to the notion of being aliens. The first thing we learn, the first thing we know about ourselves is that we are destined to be aliens. Now, the rabbis understand that upon reading this, we would immediately be tempted to explain it in terms of the period of slavery in Egypt. So Rashi's commentary immediately states, the text does not specify Egypt. It merely states a land that is not theirs. Lo ne'emar be'eretz Mitzrayim. It doesn't say Egypt. The 14th century author, Isaac ben Avraham Aboab, the author of Menorat HaMaor, a great commentary of the 14th century, uses this verse, making a reference with it to the exile in Egypt, in Babylonia, Persia, and eventually in Rome. What about these exiles in Egypt, in Babylonia and Persia, and in Rome? Whom did the Egyptians enslave, if not Egyptian Hebrews? Whom did Haman try to annihilate in Persia, if not Persian Judeans? Who were the people prosecuted and persecuted by the Romans, if not Roman Jews? In other words, alienation is ongoing. We are destined to be aliens. The words spoken to Abram by God are words that in part define our destiny. Being an alien for us is an existential condition. It is core. It is foundational to who we are. It is the very first piece of information we receive about being Jewish. Now, please do not misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that this alienation is a Jewish trait and that non-Jews cannot experience alienation. That's not what I'm saying. Rather, I am pointing out that for us, in the eyes of the biblical redactor who already understood and experienced alienation, and the rabbis, it's core. It's a main ingredient. And not only is it a main ingredient to being Jewish, it is a main ingredient to the experience of exile. In this way, it is definitive of who we are. Now, alienation is not about being a non-citizen in some country or having a foreign accent. Alienation can occur anywhere, in any country, in any setting, around the Thanksgiving table, at work, on campus, yes, even at a temple. Incidentally, the opposite of alienation is not inclusion. It is belonging. Judaism requires of us an appreciation and understanding of alienation and aliens to the point of even commanding us to love the alien in our midst. On Yom Kippur, we read the Holiness Code. There, the Torah demands of us that we see ourselves, our story, in the eyes of the alien. So, if you've experienced alienation in the last few months, in the last year, there is some good news. Welcome to the club. You are neither the first nor the last. You are not alone. Welcome to Judaism. Happy New Year. Shall we perhaps continue the service? Rabbinic Judaism requires us to examine and understand our human condition, to pay close attention to our sense of alienation, to the building blocks of exile. In the 4th chapter of Tractate Brachot, the rabbis discuss the experience of the destruction of the temple, the exile, and the separation between God and the people Israel. There they make the following statement. The rabbis taught, Tanu Rabbanan, Arba'at tzrichin chizuk, 4 elements need reinforcement. And they are Eluhen, Torah, learning, Ma'asim tovim, good deeds, Tfilah, prayer, worship, and Derech Eretz. Let us consider these for a moment. Torah is the kind of instruction, the learning that allows us to make sense of the world and that in turn directs us to greater learning and growth. Torah is that living discipline here of inquiry, appreciation for the wisdom of generations past. This kind of learning wherein we identify and internalize life's lessons and integrate them into our lives. A learning that leads to growth and enrichment, to a sense of elevation, to greater capacity for ongoing exploration. This is Torah with a capital T. The rabbis ask us to commit to this kind of learning and exploration, to trust that it can enhance our lives. In the face of alienation, in the face of exile, we must not resign ourselves to obfuscation. We must not resign ourselves to avoidance. We must learn. We must use our intellect. We must explore our ancestors' experiences of it, as well as our contemporary insights. We must shed further light on our experience. We can yet grow. Good deeds. In the face of so much alienation, so much isolation, we must not retreat. We must act. Do so for the sake of others. Good deeds are gifts to us. They reward us with feelings of value, of accomplishment, and they reinforce our connections and communal networks. Good deeds also have a multiplier effect. They reverberate and can lead to a cascade of goodness that follows. The performance of good deeds reflects and signals our commitment to others around us, as opposed to a narrow, perhaps even myopic, focus on our own well-being. Tfilah is a little bit more complicated. The English word prayer doesn't quite capture the notion of tfilah. It's not a suitable translation for the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word means evaluation, appreciation, and wonder, a sense of wonder. The Hebrew tfilah is introspective, meditative, and aims towards self-understanding and reinforcement in the context of the world and our place in it vis-a-vis our God. When the Talmud describes here Moses' prayer on behalf of the Israelites, it cites the psalmist's threefold prescription. Direct yourself to God, let your heart grow strong, and be of good courage. This is Psalm 27, the last verse. Kaveh el Adonai, chazak ve'ye'ametz libecha. In other words, our Hebrew prayer has the potential here to generate strength and courage within us. It is work that we do upon ourselves. It is intended to elevate our spiritual and emotional state and well-being in the face of challenge and fear. Torah addresses the intellect. Ma'asim tovim address others and ourselves. Tefillah addresses our spiritual, emotional well-being. It is a vehicle for emotional discovery, for identifying, naming, and understanding our emotions, for self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, and for the articulation of a commitment to ourselves, to our aspirations. And then there's Derech Eretz. Derech Eretz is also difficult to translate. It literally means the way of the land. Toward the beginning of Tractate Yoma, on the 4th page of Tractate Yoma, the rabbis ask themselves why it is that the book of Leviticus starts with the word Vayikra, meaning God called. Why does it start with that word? The beginning of the book of Leviticus says God called Moses and then God spoke to Moses. And the rabbis say, why did God have to call Moses? Did God not know where Moses was? Surely God could figure out where Moses was. God could speak to Moses as God had spoken to Moses so many times before. Why did God have to call Moses and then speak to Moses? What was the reason for that? And the rabbinic response here is that calling a person by the name they use for themselves is a laudable practice. It's laudable behavior. Here, modeled by God, it is Derech Eretz. It is the high road. It is what we ought to do. There's a great lesson here. All too often we engage in speaking to people, to the world. We don't know whom we speak to. We don't know people's names, the names they use for themselves, the way they identify themselves, the way they see themselves. We speak to. All too often, we do not understand their perspectives. We are unable to truly identify them. But true exchange here occurs when we are able to call upon our interlocutors by their true names, to dignify them with appreciation for their sense of self, for their sense of perspective. Here, Derech Eretz means more than speaking. It means engaging, respectfully, genuinely drawing in. This is the rabbinic prescription for addressing alienation and exile. This approach does not eliminate or reduce alienation. We will never eliminate or reduce alienation, but it will reinforce us and equip us with the ability to identify alienation when it takes place, to name it, and to start to appreciate its toll upon us, how it undermines our confidence, how hurtful it can be, how it may propel us towards a semblance, just an illusion of belonging. About 120 years ago, Ohio native poet Paul Laurence Dunbar composed the following lines. We wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs. No, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but, O great God, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sigh, but, oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Are you ready to engage? Can we discuss the potential of learning and growth, of good deeds, of tefillah, meditation and introspection, and truly derech eretz, the courage, the integrity to call people by their true names? How long will we continue the charade? How long will we hide? Perhaps the time has come. Perhaps the time is now. 5,782. Perhaps the place is here, the Temple-Tifereth, Israel. May it be God's will. May it be our will. May we grow out of our masks. Shana Tova to all of you. We turn to page 286, and I invite you to please rise for the Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה יוסף ראשית, שלא עשנו כדי ארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו בהם, וגור עלינו ככל העולם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים ובחר המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר
You may be seated. We turn to page 291. יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ואינם. There are stars up above, so far away we can only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. So it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. At this time, we remember those whom we have lost, those upon whose shoulders we stand, those who have made us, what we are, who have informed and guided our lives. If at this time you wish to mention the name of a loved one who has passed away and whose yahrzeit occurs at this time, please do so now. I invite us all to now please rise for the Mourner's Kaddish on page 292. Please join me. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. May the source of peace and comfort send peace and comfort to us and to all who mourn, and let us together say amen. Our service concludes with a singing of Adon Olam on page 298.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra le'ed nasa b'chavtzo kol azai malach shemo nikra v'yocharek yikol takol levado yimoch nora v'hu hayon v'hu over v'hu yiyeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'hu shemesh lechav shilo lechav hira v'li rishit v'li tachlit v'lo ha'ozer ha'mizrach v'hu elim v'hayorim v'tzurchi v'zara v'hu nisi u'manosli v'rot kosi
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שתחדש עלינו שנה טובה ומתוקה. May it be the divine will that we will together enjoy a year of sweetness, a year of goodness, a year of health, a year of accomplishment and fulfillment, a year of community, of togetherness. May we together say, Amen. Leshana tova tekatevu v'techatemu. May we be written and inscribed for a good year.